You know, if there's one defining characteristic of modern life, it's this belief that absolutely everything is negotiable.
Oh, for sure. We negotiate everything.
Right. We negotiate our salaries. We negotiate deadlines with our bosses, the terms of our relationships. We just live with this underlying assumption that if we work hard enough or if we just optimize our schedules enough, we can bend reality to fit our timeline.
It's the illusion of control.
Mm.
I mean, we think if we drink the green juice and, use the right mindfulness app, we can just pause the clock.
Exactly. But today, we are diving into the one thing that absolutely refuses to negotiate. It doesn't care about your promotion. It doesn't care that you haven't paid off your student loans yet. And it definitely does not care about your 5-year plan.
No, it really doesn't.
We are talking about the hard biological reality of fertility.
And we are talking about the glossy magazine version here, where a celebrity has twins at 50 and makes it look like it was a breeze. We are looking at the actual mechanics, the engine under the hood, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, the real science. And to do that, we are working off a really compelling stack of research today.
We are. It's anchored by a primary text called The Finite Horizon, Understanding Biological Aging and Fertility.
But we didn't stop there. To really get the full picture for this deep dive, we pulled raw data from the CDC and the U.S. Census Bureau, along with clinical insights from the Cleveland Clinic and the Berkeley Center for Reproductive Wellness. And I have to say, when you put all these sources together on the table,
the picture they paint is pretty startling.
It's incredibly stark.
It is. But the mission of this deep dive isn't to induce panic.
Right. We're not trying to scare anyone.
Not at all. The goal is to confront a mismatch. See, there is a fundamental disconnect between the way we live our 21st century lives and the biological machinery we were born with. Because our lives are getting longer, they're getting more complex, and major milestones are often delayed.
But our biology hasn't caught up.
Exactly. That machinery is essentially stuck in the Stone Age. We want to move beyond the anxiety of ticking clocks and get to a place of informed strategy.
That was the big aha moment for me when reviewing the materials. We are living these high-tech, extended lives in bodies that, well, they basically think we should be reproducing before we can legally rent a car.
Precisely. And because we don't talk about the actual mechanics, we fill that knowledge gap with myths. The biggest one being that fertility decline is just a result of modern stress or, environmental toxicity.
Oh, right. The idea that if I just relax, it will happen.
Right. People think they can lifestyle their way out of it. But the source material is very clear here. Biology is the dominant player. It is not about your calendar or your stress levels. It's about your cellular bank account.
I love that analogy from the text, the biological bank account.
It's so accurate.
It is such a useful framework, and I want to spend some time unpacking that right off the bat, because the numbers in the Cleveland Clinic data we looked at are, well, they're terrifyingly specific.
They really are. And to understand the bank account analogy, you have to understand the fundamental difference between male and female biology. It is a distinction that gets glossed over a lot, but it is absolutely crucial.
Okay, break that down for us.
Men are essentially factories.
Factories.
Yes, from a biological standpoint. They produce new sperm continuously throughout their lives. It is a completely renewable resource.
Whereas women are warehouses.
Exactly. A warehouse with a padlock on the receiving door. You are born with every single egg or oocyte that you will ever have.
Every single one.
Every single one. You open the account at birth, and you can never, ever make a deposit. You can only make withdrawals.
Okay, so let's look at the balance sheet then. According to the data, when a female is born, she's actually quite wealthy, biologically speaking.
She is. She starts with a massive balance of about 1 to 2 million eggs.
Which, I mean, that sounds like an infinite supply. If I had $2 million in the bank, I wouldn't be sweating over buying a coffee.
You wouldn't. But imagine if the bank charged you a massive non-negotiable maintenance fee just for keeping the account open.
Just for existing.
Right. By the time a girl reaches puberty, before she has even had her first period, that number has plummeted from 2 million down to about 300,000 to 400,000.
Wait, let's pause right there, because that is staggering. So before reproductive life even technically begins, before the system is even online, she has lost nearly 70 or 80% of the inventory.
Correct. The vault is leaking before you even get the key to open it, and it just keeps dropping.
And the numbers keep falling fast.
Very fast. By around age 40, the average is down to about 25,000.
25,000 left from 2 million.
Yes. And by menopause, you are often looking at fewer than 1,000 remaining.
That is an incredibly steep curve. But here's the thing that I found completely wild in the reading. I always assumed, and I think most people assume this too, that you just lose one egg a month.
That is the most common misconception out there.
Right, because you figure you ovulate, that one egg is gone, and that is your withdrawal for the month.
But if that were true, the math just wouldn't work. Think about it.
Yeah.
If you only lost one egg a month for 40 years of reproductive life, you would only use about 500 eggs total. You would have hundreds of thousands left by the time you hit age 60.
So where do they all go? If they aren't being ovulated, what is happening to them?
They get reabsorbed. The biological process is called atresia.
Atresia.
Yes. Think of it like a casting call for a Broadway show.
Okay.
Every single month, your body recruits a whole group of eggs, a cohort. It prepares them for ovulation. So not just one, but many eggs are called up.
Okay, so the curtain goes up and 20 or 30 eggs step forward for the audition.
Right. But there's only one lead role available. One egg becomes dominant and actually ovulate.
And the rest of that group.
They don't go back into the dressing room to wait for next month. They disintegrate, they die off and are naturally reabsorbed by the body continuously.
So every time you ovulate, you aren't spending one egg. You are spending a whole batch.
Exactly. And over a lifetime, out of all those hundreds of thousands of eggs, only about 300 to 500 will ever actually ovulate. The vast majority are just reabsorbed.
And here is the kicker that blew my mind. This happens constantly, right?
Constantly. It happens when you're pregnant. It happens when you are on birth control. It happens if you are completely celibate. The burn rate is hardwired into the system.
Yeah.
You cannot stop this cellular attrition.
That just completely destroys the stress argument we mentioned earlier.
It does.
You could be the most zen person on earth, eating nothing but organic kale on a mountaintop, and your body is still shredding those eggs at the exact same rate.
You cannot lifestyle your way out of atresia. It is a biological constant. And this continuous loss is why the quantity aspect of fertility is so unforgiving.
But as the source material points out, and we are moving into the second section of our roadmap here, having eggs left in the vault isn't the whole story.
Not at all.
Right, this is the hidden decline, the issue of quality. Because you could theoretically have 25,000 eggs left at age 40, but they aren't the same eggs you had at 25.
No, they are not. After the mid-30s, quality becomes the dominant issue. And this is where we need to get a little bit technical to understand why. Because we aren't just talking about old eggs in the way you talk about stale bread.
Right.
We are talking about genetic fragility.
The text used a specific term for this, aneuploidy. Can we break that down? What is physically going wrong inside the egg as it ages?
So think about what an egg actually has to do. It is a cell that holds half of your DNA. When it gets fertilized, it has to perform this incredibly complex biological dance where it divides its chromosomes perfectly to match up with the sperm.
It is a mechanical process. There are actual moving parts.
It is entirely mechanical. There is a microscopic structure inside the egg called the spindle apparatus. Think of it as the machinery that physically pulls the chromosomes apart. And there is a kind of cellular glue that holds the chromosomes together until the exact right moment.
Okay, I am picturing a factory assembly line.
That is a great way to look at it. Now, as eggs age, that machinery gets rusty. The glue starts to degrade.
So when the moment comes for the cell to divide,
It makes a mistake. The rusty machinery pulls too many chromosomes to one side, or maybe it leaves one behind. That is aneuploidy, having the wrong number of chromosomes.
and the consequences of that error are not just a simple, oops, it didn't work.
No, the consequences are clinical. The sources outline them very clearly. First, you see a lot of difficulty conceiving in the first place because the embryo often fails to implant in the uterus.
Right.
Second, there is a much higher risk of miscarriage. That is because the body's quality control system detects the genetic error early on and stops the pregnancy.
And the third consequence.
Lower success rates with IVF when using one's own eggs. Because IVF doesn't fix the eggs, it just fertilizes what is already there. If the pregnancy does continue, there is a higher risk of conditions related to chromosomal abnormalities.
Which explains why the miscarriage rate spikes so drastically after age 40. It isn't that the uterus can't carry a baby. It is that the blueprints are faulty.
Exactly. The genetic blueprints are compromised. And this is exactly why the celebrity narrative is so dangerous.
Oh, the magazine covers.
Right. We see a famous actress having a healthy baby at 48, and we think, oh, science fixed it. I have plenty of time.
And we do not see the medical chart.
We don't see that she likely used a donor egg from a 25-year-old. The uterus doesn't age the same way eggs do.
That is fascinating.
It is. You can carry a baby at 50 quite well. You just usually cannot create a genetically normal embryo with your own 50-year-old eggs.
There was a really emotional beat in the source text that connected this hard biology to our social reality. It talked about the partner timing trap.
Yes, this is the part of the data that is really hard for a lot of people to swallow.
It is the narrative of, I am ready, I am healthy, I have the job, but I just haven't met the right person yet. And the text validates that. It says clearly, it is not a personal failure. Modern dating is incredibly hard.
It is. But biology doesn't wait for the perfect life moment. That is the hard truth we are trying to confront here.
The clock keeps running.
Your ovaries do not know that you are finishing your PhD. They don't know that you are waiting for a partner who is finally emotionally available. The biological clock keeps ticking regardless of the social clock.
It feels incredibly unfair. I mean, men can reproduce into their 70s.
Oh, easily.
But for women, the door slams shut right when professional and financial stability is finally peaking.
It is a profound biological inequality. There is no getting around that. But acknowledging it is much better than ignoring it. And that is why the experts in our source material, specifically the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, or ACOG, are pushing for a completely new standard of care.
Right, they called it anticipatory counseling. I really like this concept because for a long time, the standard procedure was basically do not talk about fertility until you are actively trying to get pregnant and it is not working.
Which is a terrible strategy, because by the time you are reacting to a problem, the window of opportunity has already narrowed significantly.
So what is ACOG suggesting now?
They're suggesting that patients deserve to learn about ovarian factor fertility decline early. We shouldn't be waiting until there is a crisis. Doctors need to be having these conversations with patients in their 20s or early 30s.
So you aren't completely blindsided at 38.
Exactly. Knowledge allows for strategy. If you know the bank account is draining, you might manage your assets differently.
And one of those asset management strategies is egg freezing. Or, to use the clinical term from the text, oocyte cryopreservation. Let's unpack that option.
It is a crucial option, and it has moved from being considered somewhat experimental a decade ago to being a standard viable choice today.
The American Society for Reproductive Medicine actually weighed in on this, right?
Yes. The ASRM considers planned egg freezing to be ethically permissible and a completely valid medical way to preserve younger eggs.
So how does it actually work in the context of our bank account analogy? Is it like a savings account?
Think of it more like a biological time capsule.
The time capsule.
Yes. You are taking a withdrawal of currency today, when the biological value is still very high, and you are putting it in a deep freeze where inflation simply cannot touch it.
So if you freeze your eggs at 30 and you come back to use them at 40,
Biologically speaking, those eggs are still 30 years old.
that is the key right there. You are locking in the quality. You are totally bypassing the rusty machinery problem we talked about earlier.
You are locking in the age of the cell. Outcomes with frozen eggs can compare very favorably to fresh eggs in IVF, provided they were frozen at a younger age. That is the major caveat.
So the timing of the freeze matters immensely.
It matters more than anything.
Correct.
Freezing eggs at 41 is far less effective than freezing them at 31, because many of those 41-year-old eggs will already be in upload.
But the expert in the text adds a really important warning here. Egg freezing is not a guarantee.
No, it is absolutely not an insurance policy that guarantees a payout. It is more like buying a lottery ticket with much, much better odds. It buys you potential, but it does not promise a baby.
The source material also mentioned integrative approaches. It brought up the Berkeley Center for Reproductive Wellness.
Yes, they are noted as the first integrative reproductive medicine center in America.
And what is their approach? How does it differ from just freezing eggs?
The idea there is that while the biology is rigid, there are ways to support the overall system. It is about looking at the whole picture. So they incorporate acupuncture, herbal medicine, and nutrition alongside standard Western medical treatments.
So it is almost like if you can't stop the factory from aging, you can at least make sure the workers are well fed and the lights are on.
That is exactly it. It is about maximizing the potential of what you have left. Whether you are freezing eggs, doing IVF, or trying to conceive naturally, the goal is to create the best possible physical environment for those cells.
Okay, so we have looked at the individual, we have looked at the biology of the egg, the bank account analogy, and the interventions like freezing. But now I want to pivot and zoom way out.
Let's do it.
Because this fertility decline isn't just happening to one person in a vacuum. It is happening to everyone across the board. And when you aggregate that individual biology across an entire country, you get a demographic earthquake.
This is where the story shifts from biology to economics. And honestly, this is the part that keeps government planners and economists awake at night.
To understand why, we need to define a specific demographic term here, replacement level.
Right. This is demography 101. For a population to remain stable, meaning it does not grow but it does not shrink either, you need a certain number of children being born to replace the people who are passing away.
Makes sense.
In low-mortality countries like the U.S., that magic number is about 2.1 children per woman. That is the replacement level fertility rate.
Why the 0.1? I have always wondered that. You can't have a tenth of a child.
It is because of the sex ratio at birth. Slightly more boys are born than girls statistically. And, sadly, you have to account for mortality. Not everyone survives to reproductive age to have their own children, so you need that extra fraction to break even.
Okay, so 2.1 is the goal for a stable society. Where is the U.S. right now?
We are well below the waterline.
How far below?
According to the CDC data in our source stack, the U.S. total fertility rate is currently sitting at roughly 1.6 births per woman.
1.6.
Specifically, it was 1,626 births per 1,000 women in the 2024 data.
There is a massive gap from 2.1. That means the next generation is roughly 25% smaller than the current one.
It is, and historically, the U.S. has cheated this demographic math. We have always had fertility rates that fluctuated, but we had a secret weapon that kept the population growing.
Immigration.
Exactly. People moving here filled the gaps in the workforce. Even if native-born citizens were having fewer kids, the population stayed robust.
But the U.S. Census Bureau data we have paints a really concerning picture there, too.
It does. Net international migration has fallen sharply recently. The numbers are striking. We went from roughly 2.7 million in 2024, dropping to 1.3 million in 2025.
That is cut in half in just one single year.
Yes.
So you have a double whammy happening. You have a domestic fertility rate that is far below replacement level, and you have a rapidly slowing pipeline of immigration.
Exactly. The two safety nets are failing at the same time.
So asking the big so what question here, why does this matter to the listener who maybe doesn't want kids? Or maybe they already have them and they're done. Why should they care about the national fertility rate dropping to 1.6?
Because the economy is basically a pyramid scheme that relies on a wide base of young workers to support the retirees at the top.
We are talking about Social Security.
Social Security, healthcare systems, infrastructure maintenance. All of these massive social systems were designed in a world where there were many workers paying taxes for every one retiree drawing benefits.
But when fertility drops to 1.6, the base of that pyramid shrinks.
It shrinks significantly. And at the same time, we are living longer than ever thanks to modern medicine. So the top of the pyramid is getting much wider.
The pyramid is literally flipping upside down.
It is inverting. And an inverted pyramid is structurally unstable. It means severe labor shortages. It means fewer people paying into the tax base to support a rapidly growing elderly population.
Which puts a strain on everything.
A strain on every single system we rely on for stability in our old age. So declining fertility isn't just a personal family planning issue. It is a major macroeconomic stability issue.
It really puts the pressure into perspective. On one hand, you have the intense biological pressure, the finite horizon of the eggs. And on the other hand, you have this massive societal pressure, the economic need for a workforce.
And caught right in the middle of all that is the individual, just trying to decide when or if to have a family.
It is a staggering amount of pressure. And I think it brings us perfectly back to the sentiment expressed in the source text. The author wrote, "What I wish every junior high school health class said."
Yeah, that line really stuck with me.
Because I look back at my own health education, and it was entirely focused on how not to get pregnant.
Which is obviously very important for teenagers.
Of course. But it created a completely false impression. We spent so much time teaching the brakes, we never bothered to explain how the engine actually works.
We grew up thinking pregnancy was this instant guaranteed thing that would just happen the second you stopped trying to prevent it.
Exactly. And that fundamental lack of education sets people up for a terrible shock later in life. The source text laments this gap.
The wish is that we would just teach plain English facts from the start.
Right. Teach young people that your egg supply is finite. It declines in quality due to chromosomal errors over time. And fertility issues are deeply biological, not just some vague side effect of getting older or working too hard. And if we taught that early on, people could actually plan. They wouldn't be reacting under the pressure of a ticking clock at age 38.
Correct. If you know at 25 that your fertility will look very, very different at 35, you might prioritize saving money for egg freezing. Or you might have serious conversations with your partners a lot earlier in the relationship.
You might even structure your entire career differently.
You might. It is all about agency. You cannot change the biology, but you can absolutely change how you navigate it.
It is empowering in a way. I mean, it is scary data, but it is empowering to know the rules of the game.
Knowledge usually is empowering.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's just recap the big takeaways for anyone listening who might be feeling a little overwhelmed by the numbers today.
Let's do it. First takeaway is the biological bank account. Remember that your fertility is a non-renewable resource. You cannot make deposits, only withdrawals. And that account is drained by continuous reabsorption, which is called atresia, every single day, not just when you ovulate.
Second takeaway, quality matters just as much as quantity. The hidden decline of chromosomal air, that rusty machinery we talked about, makes conception much harder and miscarriage far more likely as we age.
Third takeaway, options do exist. Anticipatory counseling and egg freezing can buy you time, or at least give you a much clearer picture of your odds. It is about using modern technology to hedge your bets against ancient biology.
And finally, the zoom out. This is happening at a scale that affects the entire global economy. A U.S. fertility rate of 1.6, combined with dropping immigration, means we are heading toward a very different-looking society.
It really is a fascinating convergence of biology and demographics.
It is. Now, before we go, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought here. We've spent this whole time establishing that biology is this rigid, fixed timeline. But our social lives, our careers, our education, our concept of adulthood, they are all getting longer and stretching out further.
Right, as we said, we're living 21st century lives in Stone Age bodies.
So the question to mull over is this. If we cannot change the biology, and we certainly don't want to shorten our social lives or give up our career goals, how do we redesign our education system and maybe even our corporate structures so that biology doesn't come as a shock?
That is the million-dollar question.
How do we stop treating fertility like a secret personal failure and start treating it like a known biological variable that we as a society can actually plan for?
It requires a massive shift. Shifting from a reactive mindset to a proactive one. We need to build a world that accommodates the biological reality rather than just pretending it doesn't exist.
Well, on that note, we are going to close the book on the finite horizon for today. If this sparks some questions for you, maybe about your own timeline or the options we mentioned, we highly encourage you to look at the sources.
Absolutely. Go read up on the ASRM guidelines, look at the CDC demographic data, or check out the work being done at places like the Berkeley Center.
Because the more you know, the better your strategy can be.
Exactly.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We will see you next time.